Chapters 1 through 5 of Book 2 of On Generation and Corruption by Aristotle. Translated by Harold Joachim. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jeffrey Edwards. Chapter 1. We have explained under what conditions combination, contact, and action-passion are attributable to the things which undergo natural change. Further, we have discussed unqualified coming to be and passing away, and explained under what conditions they are predicable, of what subject, and owing to what cause. Similarly, we have also discussed alteration and explained what altering is, and how it differs from coming to be and passing away. But we have still to investigate the so-called elements of bodies. For the complex substances whose formation and maintenance are due to natural processes all presuppose the perceptible bodies as the condition of their coming to be and passing away. But philosophers disagree in regard to the matter which underlies these perceptible bodies. Some maintain it is single, supposing it to be, e.g., air or fire, or an intermediate between these two, but still a body with a separate existence. Others, on the contrary, postulate two or more materials, ascribing to their association and dissociation, or to their alteration, the coming to be and passing away of things. Some, for instance, postulate fire and earth, some add air, making three, and some, like Empedocles, reckon water as well, thus postulating four. Now, we may agree that the primary materials whose change, whether it be association and dissociation, or a process of another kind, results in coming to be and passing away, are rightly described as originative sources, i.e. elements. But 1. Those thinkers are in error who postulate, beside the bodies we have mentioned, a single matter, and that a corporeal and separable matter. For this body of theirs cannot possibly exist without a perceptible contrariety. This boundless, which some thinkers identify with the original real, must be either light or heavy, either cold or hot. And 2. What Plato has written in the Timaeus is not based on any precisely articulated conception, for he has not stated clearly whether his omnirecipient exists in separation from the elements, nor does he make any use of it. He says indeed that it is a substratum prior to the so-called elements underlying them, as gold underlies the things that are fashioned of gold. And yet this comparison, if thus expressed, is itself open to criticism. Things which come to be and pass away cannot be called by the name of the material out of which they have come to be. It is only the results of alteration which retain the name of the substratum whose alterations they are. However, he actually says that far the truest account is to affirm that each of them is gold. Nevertheless, he carries his analysis of the elements, solids though they are, back to planes, and it is impossible for the nurse, i.e. the primary matter, to be identical with the planes. Our own doctrine is that although there is a matter of the perceptible bodies, a matter out of which the so-called elements come to be, it has no separate existence, but is always bound up with a contrariety. A more precise account of these presuppositions has been given in another work. We must, however, give a detailed explanation of the primary bodies as well, since they too are similarly derived from the matter. We must reckon as an originative source, and as primary, the matter which underlies, though it is inseparable from the contrary qualities. For the hot is not matter for the cold, nor the cold for the hot, but the substratum is matter for them both. We therefore have to recognize three originative sources. Firstly, that which is potentially perceptible body. Secondly, the contrarieties, I mean e.g. heat and cold. And thirdly, fire, water, and the like. Only thirdly, however, for these bodies change into one another. They are not immutable, as Empedocles and other thinkers assert, since alteration would then have been impossible, whereas the contrarieties do not change. Nevertheless, even so, the question remains, what sorts of contrarieties, and how many of them, are to be accounted originative sources of body? For all the other thinkers assume and use them without explaining why they are these, or why they are just so many. Chapter 2. Since then we are looking for originative sources of perceptible body, and since perceptible is equivalent to tangible, and tangible is that of which the perception is touch, it is clear that not all the contrarieties constitute forms and originative sources of body, but only those which correspond to touch. For it is in accordance with a contrariety moreover of tangible qualities, that the primary bodies are differentiated. That is why neither whiteness and blackness, nor sweetness and bitterness, nor similarly any quality belonging to the other perceptible contrarieties either, constitutes an element, and yet vision is prior to touch, so that its object also is prior to the object of touch. The object of vision, however, is a quality of tangible body, not qua tangible, but qua something else, qua something which may well be naturally prior to the object of touch. Accordingly, we must segregate the tangible differences and contrarieties, and distinguish which amongst them are primary. Contrarieties correlative to touch are the following: hot-cold, dry-moist, heavy-light, hard-soft, viscous-brittle, rough-smooth, coarse-fine. Of these, 1. Heavy and light are neither active nor susceptible. Things are not called heavy and light because they act upon, or suffer action from, other things. But the elements must be reciprocally active and susceptible, since they combine and are transformed into one another. On the other hand, 2. Hot and cold, and dry and moist, are terms of which the first pair implies power to act, and the second pair susceptibility. Hot is that which associates things of the same kind, for dissociating, which people attribute to fire as its function, is associating things of the same class, since its effect is to eliminate what is foreign, while cold is that which brings together, i.e. associates, homogeneous and heterogeneous things alike, and moist is that which, being readily adaptable in shape, is not determinable by any limit of its own, while dry is that which is readily determinable by its own limit, but not readily adaptable in shape. From moist and dry are derived 3. The fine and coarse, viscous and brittle, hard and soft, and the remaining tangible differences. 4a. Since the moist has no determinate shape, but is readily adaptable, and follows the outline of that which is in contact with it, it is characteristic of it to be such as to fill up. Now, the fine is such as to fill up, for the fine consists of subtle particles, but that which consists of small particles is such as to fill up, inasmuch as it is in contact whole with whole, and the fine exhibits this character in a superlative degree. Hence it is evident that the fine derives from the moist, while the coarse derives from the dry. Again, b. The viscous derives from the moist, for the viscous, e.g. oil, is a moist modified in a certain way. The brittle, on the other hand, derives from the dry, for brittle is that which is completely dry. so completely that its solidification has actually been due to failure of moisture. Further, c. the soft derives from the moist. For soft is that which yields to pressure by retiring into itself, though it does not yield by total displacement as the moist does, which explains why the moist is not soft, although the soft derives from the moist. The hard, on the other hand, derives from the dry, for hard is that which is solidified, and the solidified is dry. The terms dry and moist have more senses than one, for the damp as well as the moist is opposed to the dry, and again the solidified as well as the dry is opposed to the moist. But all these qualities derive from the dry and moist we mentioned first. For 1. The dry is opposed to the damp, i.e., damp is that which has foreign moisture on its surface, sodden being that which is penetrated to its core, while dry is that which has lost foreign moisture. Hence it is evident that the damp will derive from the moist, and the dry, which is opposed to it, will derive from the primary dry. Again, 2. The moist and the solidified derive in the same way from the primary pair. For moist is that which contains moisture of its own deep within it, sodden being that which is deeply penetrated by foreign moisture, whereas solidified is that which has lost this inner moisture. Hence these two derive from the primary pair, the solidified from the dry, and the liquefiable from the moist. It is clear, then, that all the other differences reduce to the first four, but that these admit of no further reduction. For the hot is not essentially moist or dry, nor the moist essentially hot or cold, nor are the cold and the dry derivative forms either of one another or of the hot and the moist. Hence these must be four. Chapter 3. The elementary qualities are four, and any four terms can be combined in 6 couples. Contraries, however, refuse to be coupled, for it is impossible for the same thing to be hot and cold, or moist and dry. Hence it is evident that the couplings of the elementary qualities will be four: hot with dry, and moist with hot, and again cold with dry, and cold with moist. And these four couples have attached themselves to the apparently simple bodies, fire, air, water, and earth, in a manner consonant with theory. For fire is hot and dry, whereas air is hot and moist, air being a sort of aqueous vapour, and water is cold and moist, while earth is cold and dry. Thus the differences are reasonably distributed among the primary bodies, and the number of the latter is consonant with theory. For all who make the simple bodies elements postulate either 1, or 2, or 3, or 4. Now, 1. Those who assert there is one only, and then generate everything else by condensation and rarefaction, are in effect making their originative sources 2, viz., the rare and the dense, or rather the hot and the cold. For it is these which are the moulding forces, while the one underlies them as a matter. But 2. Those who postulate 2 from the start, as Parmenides postulated fire and earth, make the intermediates, e.g. air and water, blends of these. The same course is followed 3 by those who advocate 3. We may compare what Plato does in the divisions, for he makes the middle a blend. Indeed, there is practically no difference between those who postulate 2 and those who postulate 3, except that the former split the middle element into 2, while the latter treat it as only one. But 4. Some advocate 4 from the start, e.g. Empedocles, yet he too draws them together so as to reduce them to the 2, for he opposes all the others to fire. In fact, however, fire and air and each of the bodies we have mentioned are not simple, but blended. The simple bodies are indeed similar in nature to them, but not identical with them. Thus the simple body corresponding to fire is such as fire, not fire. That which corresponds to air is such as air, and so on with the rest of them. But fire is an excess of heat, just as ice is an excess of cold, for freezing and boiling are excesses of heat and cold respectively. Assuming therefore that ice is a freezing of moist and cold, fire analogously will be a boiling of dry and hot. A fact, by the way, which explains why nothing comes to be either out of ice or out of fire. The simple bodies, since they are four, fall into two pairs, which belong to the two regions, each to each. For fire and air are forms of the body moving towards the limit, while earth and water are forms of the body which moves towards the centre. Fire and earth, moreover, are extremes and purest. Water and air, on the contrary, are intermediates and more like blends. And further, the members of either pair are contrary to those of the other, water being contrary to fire, and earth to air. For the qualities constituting water and earth are contrary to those that constitute fire and air. Nevertheless, since they are four, each of them is characterized par excellence by a single quality, earth by dry rather than by cold, water by cold rather than by moist, air by moist rather than by hot, and fire by hot rather than by dry. Chapter 4. It has been established before that the coming to be of the simple bodies is reciprocal. At the same time, it is manifest, even on the evidence of perception, that they do come to be, for otherwise there would not have been alteration, since alteration is change in respect to the qualities of the objects of touch. Consequently, we must explain, 1. What is the manner of their reciprocal transformation, and 2. Whether every one of them can come to be out of every one, or whether some can do so, but not others. Now, it is evident that all of them are by nature such as to change into one another, for coming to be is a change into contraries and out of contraries, and the elements all involve a contrariety in their mutual relations, because their distinctive qualities are contrary. For in some of them both qualities are contrary, e.g. in fire and water, the first of these being dry and hot, and the second moist and cold, while in others one of the qualities, though only one, is contrary, e.g. in air and water, the first being moist and hot, and the second moist and cold. It is evident, therefore, if we consider them in general, that every one is by nature such as to come to be out of every one, and when we come to consider them severally, it is not difficult to see the manner in which their transformation is effected. For though all will result from all, both the speed and the facility of their conversion will differ in degree. Thus, 1. The process of conversion will be quick between those which have interchangeable complementary factors, but slow between those which have none. The reason is that it is easier for a single thing to change than for many. Air, e.g., will result from fire if a single quality changes, for fire, as we saw, is hot and dry, while air is hot and moist, so that there will be air if the dry be overcome by the moist. Again, water will result from air if the hot be overcome by the cold. For air, as we saw, is hot and moist, while water is cold and moist, so that if the hot changes, there will be water. So too, in the same manner, earth will result from water, and fire from earth, since the two elements in both these couples have interchangeable complementary factors. For water is moist and cold, while earth is cold and dry, so that if the moist be overcome, there will be earth. And again, since fire is dry and hot, while earth is cold and dry, fire will result from earth if the cold pass away. It is evident, therefore, that the coming to be of the simple bodies will be cyclical, and that this cyclical method of transformation is the easiest because the consecutive elements contain interchangeable complementary factors. On the other hand, too, the transformation of fire into water, and of air into earth, and again of water and earth into fire and air respectively, though possible, is more difficult, because it involves the change of more qualities. For if fire is to result from water, both the cold and the moist must pass away, and again, both the cold and the dry must pass away, if air is to result from earth. So too, if water and earth are to result from fire and air respectively, both qualities must change. This second method of coming to be, then, takes a longer time. But 3. If one quality in each of two elements pass away, the transformation, though easier, is not reciprocal. Still, from fire plus water there will result earth and air, and from air plus earth, fire and water. For there will be air when the cold of the water and the dry of the fire have passed away, since the hot of the latter and the moist of the former are left. Whereas when the hot of the fire and the moist of the water have passed away, there will be earth, owing to the survival of the dry of the fire and the cold of the water. So too, in the same way, fire and water will result from air plus earth. For there will be water when the hot of the air and the dry of the earth have passed away, since the moist of the former and the cold of the latter are left. Whereas when the moist of the air and the cold of the earth have passed away, there will be fire, owing to the survival of the hot of the air and the dry of the earth, qualities essentially constitutive of fire. Moreover, this mode of fire's coming to be is confirmed by perception. For flame is par excellence fire, but flame is burning smoke, and smoke consists of air and earth. No transformation, however, into any of the simple bodies can result from the passing away of one elementary quality in each of two elements when they are taken in their consecutive order, because either identical or contrary qualities are left in the pair. But no simple body can be formed either out of identical or out of contrary qualities. Thus no simple body would result if the dry of fire and the moist of air were to pass away, for the hot is left in both. On the other hand, if the hot pass away out of both, the contraries, dry and moist, are left. A similar result will occur in all the others too, for all the consecutive elements contain one identical and one contrary quality. Hence too it clearly follows that when one of the consecutive elements is transformed into one, the coming to be is effected by the passing away of a single quality, whereas when two of them are transformed into a third, more than one quality must have passed away. We have stated that all the elements come to be out of any one of them, and we have explained the manner in which their mutual conversion takes place. Let us nevertheless supplement our theory by the following speculations concerning them. Chapter 5. If water, air, and the like are a matter of which the natural bodies consist, as some thinkers in fact believe, these elements must be either one, or two, or more. Now, they cannot all of them be one. They cannot, e.g., all be air, or water, or fire, or earth, because change is into contraries. For if they all were air, then, assuming air to persist, there will be alteration instead of coming to be. Besides, nobody supposes a single element to persist, as the basis of all, in such a way that it is water as well as air, or any other element at the same time. So there will be a certain contrariety, i.e. a differentiating quality, and the other member of this contrariety, e.g. heat, will belong to some other element, e.g. to fire. But fire will certainly not be hot air, for a change of that kind, A, is alteration, and B is not what is observed. Moreover, C, if air is again to result out of the fire, it will do so by the conversion of the hot into its contrary. This contrary, therefore, will belong to air, and air will be a cold something. Hence it is impossible for fire to be hot air, since in that case the same thing will be simultaneously hot and cold. Both fire and air, therefore, will be something else which is the same, i.e. there will be some matter, other than either, common to both. The same argument applies to all the elements, proving that there is no single one of them out of which they all originate. But neither is there, beside these four, some other body from which they originate, something intermediate, e.g. between air and water, coarser than air, but finer than water, or between air and fire, coarser than fire, but finer than air. For the supposed intermediate will be air and fire when a pair of contrasted qualities is added to it. But since one of every two contrary qualities is a privation, the intermediate never can exist, as some thinkers assert the boundless, or the environing, exists in isolation. It is therefore equally and indifferently any one of the elements, or else it is nothing. Since then there is nothing, at least nothing perceptible prior to these, they must be all. That being so, either they must always persist and not be transformable into one another, or they must undergo transformation, either all of them, or some only, as Plato wrote in the Timaeus. Now, it has been proved before that they must undergo reciprocal transformation. It has also been proved that the speed with which they come to be one out of another is not uniform, since the process of reciprocal transformation is relatively quick between the elements with a complementary factor, but relatively slow between those which possess no such factor. Assuming, then, that the contrariety in respect to which they are transformed is one, the elements will inevitably be two, for it is matter that is the mean between the two contraries, and matter is imperceptible and inseparable from them. Since, however, the elements are seen to be more than two, the contrarieties must at the least be two. But the contrarieties being two, the elements must be four, as they evidently are, and cannot be three, for the couplings are four, since, though six are possible, the two in which the qualities are contrary to one another cannot occur. These subjects have been discussed before, but the following arguments will make it clear that, since the elements are transformed into one another, it is impossible for any one of them, whether it be at the end or in the middle, to be an originative source of the rest. There can be no such originative element at the ends, for all of them would then be fire or earth, and this theory amounts to the assertion that all things are made of fire or earth. Nor can a middle element be such an originative source, as some thinkers suppose that air is transformed both into fire and into water, and water both into air and into earth, while the end elements are not further transformed into one another. For the process must come to a stop, and cannot continue ad infinitum in a straight line in either direction, since otherwise an infinite number of contrarieties would attach to the single element. Let E stand for earth, W for water, E for air, and F for fire. Then 1. Since A is transformed into F and W, there will be a contrariety belonging to AF. Let these contraries be whiteness and blackness. Again, 2. Since A is transformed into W, there will be another contrariety, for W is not the same as F. Let this second contrariety be dryness and moistness, D being dryness and M moistness. Now, if when A is transformed into W, the white persists, water will be moist and white. But if it does not persist, water will be black, since change is into contraries. Water, therefore, must be either white or black. Let it then be the first. On similar grounds, therefore, D, dryness, will also belong to F. Consequently, F, fire, as well as air, will be able to be transformed into water, for it has qualities contrary to those of water, since fire was first taken to be black, and then to be dry, while water was moist, and then showed itself white. Thus it is evident that all the elements will be able to be transformed out of one another, and that in the instances we have taken, earth also will contain the remaining two complementary factors, viz. The black and the moist, for these have not yet been coupled. We have dealt with this last topic before the thesis we set out to prove. That thesis, viz., that the process cannot continue ad infinitum, will be clear from the following considerations. If fire, which is represented by F, is not to revert, but is to be transformed in turn into some other element, e.g. into Q, a new contrariety, other than those mentioned, will belong to fire and Q. For it has been assumed that Q is not the same as any of the four, E, W, A, and F. Let K then belong to F, and Y to Q. Then K will belong to all four, E, W, A, and F, for they are transformed into one another. This last point, however, we may admit, has not yet been proved. But at any rate it is clear that if Q is to be transformed in turn into yet another element, yet another contrariety will belong not only to Q, but also to F, fire. And similarly, every addition of a new element will carry with it the attachment of a new contrariety to the preceding elements. Consequently, if the elements are infinitely many, there will also belong to the single element an infinite number of contrarieties. But if that be so, it will be impossible to define any element, impossible also for any to come to be. For if one is to result from another, it will have to pass through such a vast number of contrarieties, and indeed even more than any determinate number. Consequently, 1. Into some elements transformation will never be effected, viz. If the intermediates are infinite in number, as they must be, if the elements are infinitely many. Further, 2. There will not even be a transformation of air into fire, if the contrarieties are infinitely many. Moreover, 3. All the elements become one, for all the contrarieties of the elements above F must belong to those below F, and vice versa. Hence, they will all be one. End of chapter 5. Recording in memory of Mitchell Edwards.